Reunion of light. Jos Cruise. Jos Cruise. Synopsis. Through this mission, I will guide each you on several trips to your deepest self in order to get back with you to identify yourselves, as they were in children. When you get there, I'll be there waiting for you, just a few steps ahead of you, to show the way you return safely to the society. During this journey, learn to take care of yourself in light, coming to again self-esteem, self-confidence, and to use intuition as a guide to everything in life. Each of you will feel more awake and conscious, talking you back to experience the reality of everything in cosmos. You feel all situations and problems differently and innovatively to meet them and solve them, with a social, physical, mental or spiritual, this at no cost, without leaving the inside of each one of you. Try and feel the difference in your lives. Grateful. Jos Cruise. Reunion of Light. Autobiography. Dear friends and the others. I was born on February 15, 1963, within a humble family, and as such I was raised poor by my late maternal grandmother and my late mother's maternal grandfather, who was a combatant in the First World War in France. It was dedicated to agriculture and several years separated from my grandmother. This grandfather, of whom I liked a lot and I still have some memories of our shared experience to date of his death, I had about 5 years old. About my father knows, though sporadically throughout my life have spoken with him only half a dozen times. I keep a few memories of the person who, just give me the name, I would if I were to live with him, and another woman who was not my mother, and taking her only lover, she disagreed. That there was growing discord between my grandmothers, I cherished and protected me while being already of advanced age, and my mother who gave blow. He said that by not having a father that I had to be the man of the house, and still had to learn things adult children. The great washes the brain. There I was surviving on my grandmother, that dear spirit, as after his disappearance from earth, continued to be my spiritual guide for years. Humble person who was not handled very well by her daughter, my mother. Jos Cruise. At the height of my 11 years, my grandmother passed away. At that time I felt abandoned and sad in the world. Both the loss of first person, I had the feeling of love and beloved unconditionally. Having no family anymore except my mother, very rigid person. This always taught me good manners, education, honesty and work. That soon heard her say, as well worker was the scooter, and in other words, how the money was as I earned, so was the food he ate. I never missed anything, but I started to work early, a small business that she had to scrap, right from the moment I entered the primary, in which I took the 4th class with the help of chickens, rabbits and eggs as an offering of my mother teachers. Because my spirit does not give these basic things that society demands to live in it. But there had to be this person, as I have chosen, to give me the physical form before birth. I would like to continue studying, but I did not accede to his will because she is very ill. I promised him then that after learning a profession and make my life go back to school. After the time he'd learned the carpenter's first profession was followed by the restoration consultant, among many others that followed throughout my life story. And I began to behave like human beings and not as a spiritual being. Lacking the physical presence of my grandmother, who helped me in everything I needed, mainly for my spiritual life and give my further development and ascension. As an example I will describe, after my birth when asleep, which was rare, instinctively put my hands are always on call position of Catholic prayer. As I was growing up, that fact disappearing as he had of other beings of light. And just to anticipate events before they happen. Other times to be with elderly patients who felt they attracted the pain better or simply disappeared. Reunion of light. And then I felt growing inside. Other times I had the feeling of having been in certain places and never have been there in this life story. As feelings of already having done things that I do not even recall at the time of that experience, still short. Other times the dreams or nightmares, as we know, are nothing more than bad copies in black and white, the thoughts we have when awake, which are transferred through to the unconscious mind, which appear during sleep. A variety of other situations happen to me, due to energy circulation in the universe, as by nature or certain places and people. But who could explain what I just described? My mother did not even think, call me crazy or not of this world, and had no reason to be. Who was my confidant? Was my grandmother, because she was explaining to me the wisdom that came with your deepest self. That happened to me, and especially why it is that happened to me. She always described it very well designed, with great humility, love, compassion and total spiritual surrender. This happened that after his physical death, his spirit has always guided me until adulthood. But today I feel that stopped evolving spiritually since then until a few years ago. Jos Cruz. In retrospect, as he created my professional independence and material, but never stopped studying the mysteries that encompass the terms Gnostics, but begin live in the mind or intellect, physical and material, with the age of 14 years to open a bank account, against the wishes of my mother. I worked, and put on, wore me buy my food, and things necessary to my survival remaining deposited in the bank. In personal relations he had few friends as well as today, because very few people who have a very empathic sensitivity, but increasingly more, and still be well in favor of humanity, by this point besides work and study on their own as described earlier. I bought a bike already old, was one of my dream, in height. But I gave way to go to work. I started rowing and later weightlifting. However, I saw an ad on television called Paratroopers, with the slogan, "If you have the spirit of adventure and want to belong to the family, parachute jump with us." As a family was what my mind told me that was missing. After making the 16 years I enlisted up for this, I called and verified. In September 1981, I had been in the place of Dankos, to the future military, but when some friends known told me that there was just crazy, I confirmed, and after 2 years decided to leave dissatisfied. Then I found that most were not crazy, and with respect to all the others were stupid. I was then 19 years, and 2 of which Troop met. For those times then met his first girlfriend, with whom I fell in love, that after a few years later to marry. Then immigrated to Switzerland, but returned after some time to get divorced at my request, because we do not understand how married life. For a while I tried with the mind and intelligence that it comes from another partner, for relationship ever, in order to remarry, and come to a family. Reunion of light. Until one day I met one who, after a few months of dating, married again. But the Catholic Church, which at the time of my birth had received the blessing of baptism. From this marriage were born 2 children, to which they named Anna and the past 4 years of Martha. I was very happy with both births. I thought that I was my life the way I longed for. I worked on his own as well as today. There was a wedding to respect, to guide the 2 daughters grow up, a woman who always loved and respected, who erected the house with me today still well. But through a so-called destination, are we that we do moment to moment, often unconsciously. After about 11 years of marriage I decided to return to divorce, which came to pass. I was once again feeling the bitter taste of losing trust in someone. And only because the children have been away from me. The only family I have, for my biological mothers have since passed away a few years ago. To help the party, at that time, I was bedridden due to various health problems which had to ignore their years without knowing it. For example, weighed about 100 kilograms to 1.70 tall, I had been diagnosed degenerative problems, hips and spine, to which I was invited to be operated, and I always refused because there are no guarantees of getting good by the medical teams. However, for personal company got a depression. It came all at the same time. Help me a few neighbors and friends in these circumstances. I can move to the treatments since I was in condition to be able to move, just as snakes. What was the desire of some people who thought I was that my family until then, They are direct family members of children, to the point that I wish my death. Jos Cruz. Then I found myself struggling with these whole situation: shares, divorce, courts, parental authority, bureaucracies, no cars to work, any money and health. I was then for the first time in the lives of sick leaving. They wanted me to retire on disability. I declined because I had a feeling and believed that this would still not be my end. Had 39 years of age. Do not know how, but I felt I had to do something against what until then, thought, and that everything had been in the background created by my mind. Reunion of light. The beginning of change. At first, the mind that lay accounts that happened to me was due to others. Later I came to realize that this was precisely the same mind that I betrayed led to this situation, deplorable and unworthy for any human being. One day I came home with the feeling that there was something I missed home, but somehow there was something that attracted me. I felt that this was attracted by the fact that I myself have built almost entirely with my own hands wisely love and affection. And I looking for that would be. I found myself through it all. I felt impelled by a strange force that led me to do so. It was as if we walk with your eyes closed, knowing the way, that feeling. Then I came to discover certain gifts and artifacts, hidden, that were completely unknown to me, but which made me shiver. Later I learned the meaning of them and what they intended. They had intended to bury myself in her lifetime. Then I grabbed them carefully, always with courage and carefully, without fear. Some could just throw them out, and every time I did I felt better. Other belongings were to stop burning fireplace, including a photograph of me that there was to be treated, even though it all burned up but the photo, so that threw into the fire that jumped out immediately to stop the fire coming with me. Then from there my whole life began to unravel as I do. Jos Cruz. I felt that to have the courage to look for something that did not know what it was and where he could be without ever thought how much it would change my life forever. First was a person who was very medical Z, as its dependence due to health problems so far. In beautiful night I came to feel that strange force in me, not knowing where it came, with a little light, when I closed my eyes and blinked in the darkness of night. Today I feel why, but at the time I was perplexed to give me lighting. I did a fire outside the house and all that was burning drug, as well as natural products. Well, then capsules looked Laotian shots while the maximum milligrams were reduced to dust. I watched it and felt a part of my pain disappeared with them. To this date have spent about 10 years, without ever taking whatever it was, drugs, for whatever. Until now I did a little of my presentation to the people I know, only sporadic, depicting some passages of my life. From now on I'll start transcribing this book, in which I will explain how the strength of mind was nearly killing me physically and morally, and how I come out on top of it. I write this first book by several factors. The main thing is intuition. Maybe 20 years ago, I began to feel something inside me, no voice but a feeling that one day he would write a book, but not knowing about what and why, just felt. Sometimes I wrote a few lines or blocks simply describing my state of mind, both in Portuguese and English. I just wrote what was in the soul. What gave me pleasure, but however the relentless pursuit of the most suitable for a restoration of my health in all aspects through nature. I began to feel that this could only be effected through a reunion with the light that shone within me that I still felt as a child. Reunion of light. But I heard a radio station talk about Ricketts Foundation and which itself. Very good, then bought a book, started reading it, and to the extent that he read was practicing the teachings which it came. I felt attracted to do it. Always alone, still reach several degrees on the scale of Reik. However, my health continued to improve day after day. As I had gained more knowledge about the various ways to treatments or cures, the test always come after me first. I began to feel that I was coming back as a small gift as a child. The treating sick people know that today is the energy that flows through the universe. Then as I was focusing more on my being and Mother Nature, to see their auras, meanings, and feel these feelings. Then I became attracted to human auras, as their views through the third vision, colors and meanings. About these studies, my female intuition told me it was time to start writing. Let me explain for those who do not know that. Every human being has a female and one male. Whether you are male or female, the energy emanating to the feminine side of each being, the spiritual energy is the same one that connects us to the cosmos and thus to our spiritual side. The male energy is that which connects us to the earth and material things existing in it. Jos Cruz. Reunion of Light. Right. I started to write a paper about the human auras and asked my conscience. But always for therapeutic or curative for this field is that I feel my entire evolutionary pathway and the obligation to disclose to others, and then wake up to see the same journey as me. And then come to those who need help just having to pay more loving light power, which is increasingly one that circulates in the universe. As I would write everything I had learned and experienced, about the 7 colors of the rainbow that make up as well as the last color that was added in the last century. The indigo blue, which is the color of human evolution, in consequence of this task, which is not edited and do not know if I will edit, because I felt that during this task was to initiate a process of spiritual maturation. It is completed when I left that job to have the need to look for people to see their human auras. Simply got to feel them, both deceased persons, living or yet unborn. So since I can remember that I am rarely slept, this only happens sporadically, half-dozen hours per quarter at most. Jos Cruz. And I practiced meditation for a few years, active, passive and dynamic. Meditated an average of 4 to 5 hours per day, was experiencing physical sensations, mental and spiritual. As a complement to physical and spiritual, practiced Hatha Yoga and its asana. Currently no longer need to apply these techniques, due to be and remain in a state of grace. Occupation as a small business will have approximately 25 years, of which I was founder of the fun of the area, which I derive some income for the maintenance of my life. About more than represent the light of the universe, which will read reflects who I am. Very well. I am going from now slightly raise the veil, as I turned around my life in every aspect of 360 degrees. And for that I will get some points as reference has written so far. In order to become items of lighting for those who need them, whether for therapies or cures. Help for a spiritual awakening, or simply for self-development. Thank you. Reunion of Light. Chapter 1. Spiritual Birth. As is well known and proved by spiritual scientists, when the fetus in the womb is his biological spirit descends through spiritual light, the place where Kamati remained since its last incarnation, and from there by the power of light had the privilege of choose their biological parents. That way he can afford to incorporate within the biological mother. He made that choice because they are beings that will directly or indirectly help plan your next life. After physical birth, some are born with eyes wide open, due to the increasing capability of circulating energy on Earth that influences this aspect. Parents will be their guardian angels, lest anything bad happen to you, and at the same time to give him the necessary material benefits, to its future development, either mental, physical and spiritual. What sometimes is not easy, and eventually forget the last. Jos Cruz. Reunion of Light. Chapter 2. Fitness of the Earth Spirit. After birth, the light that the newborn sees through the third view is different from those that the spirit was used to feeling. Because she is now full of impurities, either physical vibration, hence spend most of the time sleeping. This sleep, as we know, is a meditative state in which the spirit leaves the physical body and returns to the source of light energy to recharge their real mother. As you know, light equals energy. In this light source is where the spirit remains to make the return to the physical body in astral travel. This light and has a variety of ways, who will later on, as your conscience will grow over the years, may be identified as elves or fairies and castles hanging, etc. Jos Cruz. Reunion of Light. Chapter 3. Growth of this spirit. Anyway, the biological parents want the best for your baby. Sometimes it does not happen because of that they have forgotten when they passed by it. Because they have gone to live in the mind and intellect, and most of them have more, especially to Western Europeans, and why. Later on I will explain this fact. Thus they no longer understand why when the child lay in a certain part of the bed, she always wakes up later in another area. Because the spirit rules his sleeping body, and remove the etheric lines or negative calls that cross the earth. If this were not, the child's body would succumb. This is just one small example of how the spirit has its own self-defense, and as is well known, when there are accidents, as a rule the young children are always spared, because the spirit of the child is still bathed in pure energy. This energy that protects, creating a magnetic field around it, applies here. An old Portuguese saying that the baby and babe God puts his hand down. Oh God here is actually the cosmic light. Jos Cruz. Reunion of Light. Chapter 4. The Birth of Consciousness. To the extent that the physical body of the child grows, as will be adapting his spirit to the new environment, unconsciously begins to imitate their parents. Because the spirit has the infinite ability to adapt to all that is new, which comes from its depths, this channel is always the same evolution. That this was his plan as light begins, then copy all that parents do. I'm simply giving the example of the biological parents, and others can be. Only the parents and the family directly as a rule, are those that are and thus interact with the child. When these imitations begin, that is created in the mind, such as the floor eating etc. This is the start of construction of its consciousness, because the spirit is confused between their primal essence and this new adventure. Between these two situations begins in your consciousness, which will accompany this reincarnation. This consciousness as that is developing, always accompanied by the spirit, is giving rise to the birth of the mind, which can only be developed in the ground plane. Jos Cruz. Reunion of Light. Chapter 5. The Emergence of 1001st. When known, the mind begins to develop more around 6-7 years. Why? Because it is from this age that the society has determined to change the mental part of the spiritual. If it was not in communion with the spirit, would continue to live in consciousness light and evolve more and more. What was on this pretext that came to earth? So around this age, the physical and spiritual get to know the mind and its discontent born the rules, habits and learning are molding to stay on earth. As Western society requires a rapid growth of the child for future material commitment, this gets you the same dump everything and anything to the mind recently growing rapidly. As the demand is very large, then the child begins to feel confused between what was familiar and the new one had not asked. He begins to know the emotional instability. Hence arises the so-called age of the wise. Many parents do not understand, but only the spirit of the child is looking for explanations for the kind of feelings as feel. Jos Cruz. Reunion of Light. Chapter 6. Denying the New. When the spirit is to deny what is new, or too much for the support that can currently only do its part, it is your self-defense. How that happens? It turns out that the spirit to feel what it is excessive or uninteresting to its evolution, or not yet the time has come to accept that growth itself. Send messages through. When I say light, as both can be lights, but are always of the nature which we identify as spiritual. I repeat that this is light, yet maintains the connection between the body and the source of light through iambically called silver cord, which can be seen in meditative states. Thus the message reaches the consciousness of being, which in turn are put into practice, and then begins to have called the various signs of health problems. He trains only and only directed to the physical body, such as calling attention to something that is not going well. Let me give an example. Jos Cruz. Upon entry of the child at the school, many of them begin to have vision problems. This happens as described above, which is a sign of the spirit is to deny this news. It is here that one should get the same way for feeling and understanding to the child and go on to explain how that works. From there the spirit and consciousness of mind and a little too soft and soft are making this release. If there is a continuing ignorance and forcing this part, by parents or teachers, then it becomes a problem. It begins to affect other parts of the body, psyche, for example. Reunion of Light. Chapter 7. Light and Colors. We all know there is the attraction that children enter and existing colors on planet Earth, the solar light, one color of clothing, a clear tendency to a football club, a box of tablets for example, amongst others. Why? The child in these situations, which normally lasts until the end of his earthly life. Not because of the flavor of things or the temptation of the oldest known drag, or try to drag the child to a specific sports club, just as they like, and believe, that children like them too. How sweet, and clothes among others. The child is not attracted by the content of the thing, but by its exterior colors that identify with it. Because these colors are the same, sometimes less refined but not cease to be, from one form or another reflecting the same place where the spirit is going to feed. The source of light. Jos Cruz. The example of this is that often the child wants a certain thing, and after giving her simply lose interest in the content, just getting the packaging. But it is noteworthy that children are never attracted to negative colors, the black for example. Many people who unequivocally calls the color, but the color is not black but rather the lack thereof. When a child or an adult feel a particular attraction for some color in particular. This was one of the basic colors when she stayed in committee, which often through life without ever changing the trend for other colors, only much later with a proper spiritual evolution, could pull other colors exist in the universe. Working this way, the colors that exist in your astral aura, you are most likely to be interested. Reunion of Light. Chapter 8. The growth of the mind. To the extent that the child is developing in all aspects, his mind too, there are things that both admit the spirit consciousness as a function of evolution, as some do not, as previously described. It is here that you will get. The mind, when it created its power, is negativity. It is from the time the child ceases to live in harmony with his spirit, and then begin the thoughts to be born, situation that often leads to emotional instability, which has been created by the mind when the child is not elucidated by those in charge, then get a lot of anomalies itself, without managing to define. They then begin to appear the first signs of low esteem, self-confidence, thus beginning to develop unconscious negativity. One of these reflexes is starting to change colors of clothing or darker tones, of the same colors, like the feeling of being alone in the world without having someone to understand or help. They begin to isolate him, and increasingly the mind begins to atrophy, the consciousness ceases to be in contact with the spirit. Jos Cruz. Reunion of Light. Chapter 9. The Supermac of 1001st. The mind is a necessary mechanism to humans. But unfortunately many people do not know how to use as explain why further ahead, and as often when it grows wildly. Fact increasingly in vogue among young people, because they are unaware happens this. It is then that more and more abound thoughts of doubt about everything, which begin to question the spirituality. This misunderstanding then begins to emerge into the conscience, is the link between body and spirit that is the filter. In turn conscience begins to attack the mind, and the mind does the same way, the conscience in lucid moments, the mind with thoughts which then lead to emotions. Jos Cruz. Reunion of Light. Chapter 10. Energy in the physical body. The human is a being of light in physical form. Since the beginning of his birth, he continues to be fueled by it, hence spending more time sleeping. This is the basic form of power which nourishes the spirit. The other physical quality food, liquid or solid, is only to keep the physical body and nothing else, just like air, prana, which is also liquid and has all the nutrients necessary for human life. As they are being consumed by the body, is being transformed into energy for their maintenance. When the going will be an adult and still to have a good relationship with your spirit and conscience, not much attention to what goes on in the mind, continuing to live through your intuition. You never get in life what is commonly called the problems. Is of the order it is, because there is a natural balance between the physical and spiritual. Jos Cruz. Reunion of Light. Chapter 11. Energy Blockages. The lights are from the sun, moon, lamps and even the fire that is in front of me and I'm writing. When they reach the pituitary gland, this in turn transformed into energy, powering all body cells human for its normal functioning. This is the positive energy, which is usually called in the East Yin. This quality of energy is keeping us, for example, to keep warm, but if do not we admit our physical body in the negative, appointed by the Yang energy that come from the earth and moon and what is generated by them, we simply burn physically. An example is when the body temperature increases due to the lack of the negative pole. That's why we drink so much water, and there is need catch sun, is the same as positive energy. Fever is the name you assign to this classically can block negative energy. A block of positive energy and yin happens when, for example, spends much time in the cold, using synthetic clothes to cover the body, or who has a habit of avoiding sunlight through Dunn's wonderful glasses for the sun, developing the most various pathologies. Jos Cruz. Reunion of Light. Chapter 12. Breathing life as. From the moment that man gives the first cry after birth, as we all know is to put your lungs working. Only during his life many people forget how to breathe appropriately, for the maintenance taking into account the physical body as well as your mental and spiritual development. In everyday life, many people with blindness and want to achieve certain specific social and material levels. They spend the day running from one side to the other without the least discernment of how breathing, where breathing and quality of the air they breathe. When one ceases to self-conscious how to breathe, given the varied circumstances of our life, then get the energy blocks, going immediately affect the psyche of the person, then the physical body. As is well known that start and always its inception in the forum psychic. Why? Because the people allow themselves to be soft and be conquered to the mind, leaving to connect with their spirits, because by being in contact with the inner core, which includes conscience and intuition together to become self-conscious. Jos Cruz. For a certain way and unconsciously breathing the same way when they were children, and breathed only intuitively, and intuition of that this is living healthily. Because the way we breathe in our lives will reflect in general. For example, a sportsman knowing breathing when performing certain physical activity without thinking, but only by intuition he is always feel the mother nature, because it gives him everything in the quantities necessary for their performance. Thus the athlete by just relax and go by your own body energy, he just being an observer, and feels that the body itself is telling to go the proper way to breathe. When this harmony is installed to have the feeling that there is an individual as developing, but something higher. This feeling happens because it no longer attached to watch what goes on in the mind. Returning to resonate with our witch as the teacher, it is noteworthy that when do not mind lets in this territory, at the end of the exercise or performance of the same, there is a sense of freedom, pleasure, lightness and well-being, often inexplicable. Reunion of Light. Chapter 13. The Thought. Any individual who is leaving to hear your inner voice will increasingly living in mind. This in turn will make you getting dreams, voices about decisions that conscience takes, gaining habits begin to be born desires, emotions, and increasingly live in harmony with him and thought. Well, it is from here that I begin to feel a bit like fish in water, and I was not the Aquarius. For having been part of my whole process of lighting the most cost change. Thought is no more than the absence of power to be in touch with ourselves. He in turn is fed by the positive energy that circulates in each one of us, just leaving us at the mercy of destabilizing the negative energy creature, passing thus depriving us of all that which is holy and necessary to our life. That is why when people have this imbalance of power, has a tendency to negativity and everything it entails. I often illustrate to patients in the form of two well-known examples by any person, as well as their practical resolution. Jos Cruise. Reunion of Light. Chapter 14. The Song in 1001st. As many of you, many times after hearing a song, that song come to repeat in your mind for hours, days or even months consecutively, broken record type, that often leads you to despair. This is due to a breach of positive energy. The mind will get the energy circuit. As the mind has the ability to create whatever it is only by assimilation and repetition that goes on the senses. In analysis it is noted that when the song appears in the mind, only the letter and never appears to music. For all that is musical, vibrating and is only identified by the spirit. The song always comes back to speak out whenever they feel, sometimes weaker or confused, that derives from it. How the mind, when it comes to this point to command the individual. She wants to completely take control of being. Want to come to you. By this time it has taken root in his heart, so no one can ignore or remove the power that has in one way or another it was given. How do you give back? Let's start with calm her down, because she has created, because habits can never fight it, in part because these are habits that keep us, and this would be fighting against ourselves, which would lead to madness, to death, in many cases physical. Jos Cruise. So we have to deal with it all: love, affection and respect. When the song appear in your mind, applying the consciousness, it is said, or through words or mentally, "Mind, thanks for reminding me of the song," and it automatically stops immediately, or go back one or two more times to ring you in the head. If this happens again, thank you, when to stop listening. Congratulations, because his conscience tells her to mind nothing more than just a servant. You gave the first signs of wanting to regain command of him consciously. It is possible when the song has long walked in the head, which is not just trace for the first time you become aware of it. Because the mind has not yet identified the power of consciousness, when the song or some such negative thinking reappears, always follow the same criteria to send away. Reunion of Light. Chapter 15. Creative 1001st of Dreams. Whent I explained before, the mind, although the quality of which, some essential to the development of the self that lies ahead, will explain. Others are no longer, so to speak, so welcome, as with dreams. As I said before, the mind just learns something after you repeatedly being required, such as reading or tell whatever it is. We have the case of the multiplication table at the primary school that the mind has to be slaughtered to decorate. The dreams that many people mistakenly give their value and appreciation, and every dream start to dream more and louder. There are just one way the mind, while we are awake, doing our daily tasks, we come up with suggestions in the form of thoughts that we give due attention but are not realized, getting to hover in the mind like the song. The mind is to keep them for a long part of the brain free, because that part of being unconscious, and later during sleep, this time that the physical body is partially abandoned by the spirit, which will wander in astral travel. Jos Cruise. It is then that Sly tells the unconscious mind to release the photos you took earlier, when he was in a waking state. It is also worth noting that all the photos and films, sometimes feature length, are always black and white. Following often the scene of repetition, I call very bad photocopies taken. Step to add that to the same dream, which is a form of thought held, continues to suck people's energy. This is why when a person wakes up, feels weak and often confusing. Many people attach great importance to dreams, but dreams the caller may understand as a reminder of something that happened when he was in the waking state. I often say that dreams do not identify themselves by what they can tell us, but by what we can make you feel. Reunion of Light. Chapter 16. The 1001st in the Spirit of Place. How many people in their day-to-day living in despair because they cannot achieve their goals, whatever their natures are, and instead of going to bed to sleep and deserve rest to the physical body that also includes the mental part, stay up to imagine serving up the wrong mind to find a solution to what they could not solve during the time they were awake. They then pass this precious period of rest, thinking, and continuing to think. Until at some point, think, They found the key to your puzzle. They feel happy and sometimes even happy, and yet spent the night feeding the mind blank. When they arise often have symptoms of having been hit by a bus, nor do they feel the head and what goes inside. Sit there, so to speak. They will immediately try to apply the conclusion reached overnight. This is engraved in the mind, ultimately in practice to make a completely different way, or by changing some details. And then to see that this is the real way. But what should be done? Why this happens? Jos Cruz. During the time that the mind was in superactivity, which feeds on positive energy, the body was deprived of when the mind simply for lack of energy. It was not a mechanism dependent on it. As the mind is quiet, then there is an opening to penetrate through the spirit of wisdom, a light eternal consciousness, or just acting directly on the physical body. The example of this is that often people find themselves doing their own nonsense, or intuitively without knowing why. In the world of logical and rational understanding, this leading us to conclude that the mind is not spinning. This is an example of such a person has all the time to think, and at the last minute, see what it took many hours to building collapse. Just because the system unconsciously tired, thus allowing universal wisdom falls on him with his reunion of light. Chapter 17. The 1001st as a servant. As mentioned previously, in the mind also is needed, but did not exist. It is what brings us back to things in this life and past situations, typophile to which access when we need. As is the case when some people talks to them and need to rely on past events to have conversation. Another feature of the mind as enumerated above, due to their repetitive power, through it we learn to read, write, walk, talk and interact in the world earth, each other, as well as help the planet to evolve in every aspect. Thus harmonious inner consciousness of each person evolves as well, as it is the passport to the spirit. All that is positive and beneficial for all humanity and the cosmos, he always accepted and duplicate what he receives from most power that yields a light. This power is a power of love, compassion, humility and light, is for many beings of light asset to help those in need, these beings of light to fulfill the mission to which they are intended in this experience. After his physical death the spirit rises to the Kumati. This place in the universe where you will wait in your own light the wisdom that experience acquired in this last and other earlier in peace and preparing for the next reincarnation if any. Jos Cruz. My friends, this is how it works, believe it or not, I do not make any difference, because the level of spiritual ascent I've ever had the privilege to meet, living in this earth as it has in past me is untouchable. Hence I will be able to give way to be, and be exposed to playing comfortably, and you can pass all my knowledge to this part without any straw, academic thesis, or doctoral purchased on planet Earth today. The way I approach these issues can be complicated for many, for those intellectuals who live in mind and know how it works but do not explain to others. How is the majority in the medical profession, which I respect. It is regrettable that for years some of them walk to school to be paid by taxpayers, and when a person is sick, most of which only prescribe only knows, others go a step further and even say the name of the problem or disease, those other that people trust and sometimes even call them saints or gods. These explain, diagnosing the problem, bypassing the patient to explain how and why this situation happened to you, as well as the most appropriate way to solve. For those people who feel what I write to thank these, as for the last class of medication that I mentioned. For others only ask you to be more conscientious about divide so beautiful that one's life. My gratitude to all these beings of light. Reunion of Light. Chapter 18. Disease and the Psyche. As is generally known, any disease always begins in the psyche. Starting with the head is the rudder of the body, is where it lies. That in turn, when the mind begins to steal her power, she begins to resent this lack energy gradually. Since we are in the area of the head is out there to start. For example, what happens in most of the young by the time of puberty will be a ghost known as the medical acne, This happens because of a sure and certain framework of some glands like the thyroid to the physical body. Then prescribe creams and more creams and other crap to try to calm the situation. But of no use, because evil comes from within the person, and face the evil within only mirrors this way to draw attention to such individuals. Kind of like you're at an age you like to see in the mirror you see there if you are taking attention to what is happening for you inside. Well, this time is no more apparent reason than a lack of positive energy in this area of the body, which is why it is not felt to get into a snowball, as described in chapter 6. Such figures more closely resemble facial Christ. This happens due to the positive energy left to move the head in this region, due to non-acceptance of new facts in life and giving wings to negative thoughts. Jos Cruz. It's a cycle, or to stop or increasingly creeps, then when it comes to an older adult whether the person has not accepted these facts before. The same over time grow and become large or small bouts of anger or rage, this negative energy that has been wrapped in the body for years in the form of negative thoughts about something. One day will have to come back to the surface of the face, manifesting itself through a rash of faces, which give the name of wrinkles, so little appreciated by the ladies. The solution is to unconditionally accept what you are presented with and required by consciousness through intuition, with love, which is precisely why this channel is no cure. Reunion of Light. Chapter 19. Disease and the Psyche. As we reach the physical part, when the problems are not resolved at the individual's psychic, the situation tends to spread more and more, with an increasing manifestation of the spirit in the hope to reach the consciousness of being for what is going on in the psyche. As in many cases will be ignoring the states and other organs are being affected. When a person continues to tend to ignore the body language, I get the pains, the body's warning sign for this organ that is malfunctioning. If you continue to ignore the negative energy is going to break the weaker side of the organ. Or the patient there will have to go the knife in many cases. But that you will never solve the case nor with the drugs can do, are only to remedy the situation. Very well, healing matter who it hurts, patients can do so must be used since the beginning of the situation does not depend on others, whether they are of no medical value to drive them from their view. And when people live unconscious of them, do have to resort to such a sciences that for this purpose was discovered. Or other such mediums, healers of the same class, visionaries or charlatans who in most cases have no scruples, if that are what I mean. Jos Cruz. Because none of them will be able to heal, in some cases nothing more than treat. Because as the problem began in the mind and the same is linked to the consciousness, the latter in direct contact with spirit. It is from there so that any cure will have to start. How do you do? You'll have to return to his childhood. The path is closer to go right to the child that does not exist in the most secret of his being, and hear it and feel it coming back this way to build close ties with it. Because it may now have forgotten that led to the disease, as is increasingly interacting with it, it then begins to recognize it, and so back to soft to give you confidence. From this interface you can ask why the disease that hit and how to solve. She just listened to it sometimes takes a little time to respond, because she understands that you are not yet ready to solve the problem. In short, it is the desire you to suffer a bit more not to return to the same happen to you. When it manifests in one form or another for the first time, you can give thanks to heaven, but because you began to hear your inner voice, again as a kid. From that moment everything will be turning in his life to take you to your desired self-healing for zero prices. For this process strongly advise you to do meditation, passive or active, that best fit each one. Later on, I will explain how you can also make the trip. Thank you. Reunion of Light. Chapter 20. Food Pranic. For there may be a good balance of energy the human being will have to take into account the air, prana, you eat. This balance is achieved when the human being will ever have health problems. First step, becoming increasingly aware of air quality that inspires, needless to say how to find it. Then the breath itself, among other things inspired oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide as we know. What many people do not know the extent to which part is that the way we breathe our metabolism changes. As influences our conscience and thus its operation, so this is how? When breathing air, and only natural that I am referring to the nose and only the nose, is a new air that will go through all our cells throughout the human body. When consciously breathe, this air is automatically changed to a higher quality. How conscience enters this amendment to further increase quality, as it also changes and feel more refined and powerful. A good example of this often happens unconsciously. Jos Cruz. Before lifting too much weight, breathe deeply 2 or 3 times before the rise, because we are at the same time to admit more oxygen in the lungs. Give to breathe with all the ability, passes them to have a greater blood supply, which in turn feeds the muscles, giving you more tone. When it reaches the brain where consciousness is established, that due to increased blood pressure, superior quality makes it work, resulting in better performance of the same. Now we will retain the prana in the lungs. When there is a conscious retention of air in the lungs, the mind just will not stop energy circulation. Take the test and feel it. It is precisely at this point you can switch to a higher level of consciousness just by intuitively connect us with our spirit. Cause right now there is nothing to bar the union from being with the universe. And last expiration. When this happens should always be conscious, because it has already gone through the whole body, is loaded with toxins and impurities harmful to health, both belonging to the physical and psychic forum. The act expires must be done with this force to completely exhaust stale air. This should be done mainly through the mouth, seeing that feels some blockage in some of the forums, and therefore unlock. Passing this order to have better movement, panic, which as we know when the air is pure inspired a rich source of energy, feeding this way in many cases perhaps take with rigor. Thank you. Reunion of Light. Chapter 21. Good day. That's how you rate this chapter. Why? I got up a little, and when I sat down to write to you, I felt that this was a message, like all the others that have been going to this book, which are nothing more than what is being asked by my spirit enlightened. Always write without giving wings to the mind, and simply keep me in tune with the source of light from which all power emanates, whether the scope lunar, solar, terrestrial or spiritual, that when I join in me I am in the sacred whole. This good day, as the mention of thanks that sometimes do at the end of some chapters, is not thought but felt that I notoriously required to do so, due to the humility that comes from my soul. Because as I have not written through the mind, but dictating word after word and sometimes letter by letter, without ever questioning the meaning. Feeling when I was in school at the time of writing a saying, never thought of what was going to write, just waiting for the next word. This is an act that you know as well, which is to be living out of mind, because what I am alive and feel, an enormous sense of well-being and fullness accompanied by a great inner peace. This is how we classify the manner of putting on paper what I demand the spirit. Thank you. Jos Cruz. Reunion of Light. Chapter 22. Thanks. There, as I am writing and feeling what I write, most of the times I have direct views to those who write this book. It is for these people because they do not achieve through my physical presence in all aspects. And feeling the need to contact them, ask my holy light which would be the way to do it. In response, and secure for my birthday, was that it was time to write a book to explain to people that are looking outside of what we have within themselves. It is for these people when I feel the humility of gratitude, I worship. Thanks again. Jos Cruz. Reunion of Light. Chapter 23. Intuition as a Guide. Today I had the feeling to get up to go to work in my occupation, but shortly thereafter my spirit told me to see you write about intuition. I feel that it is their desire to end this book sooner rather than later, because there are people waiting for you. While this is new for me to pass through testimony of paper, I will not know how to edit, as well as the whole process you do get your hands. I sound like an empty new and mysterious love. The cover has showed me through the spiritual light that guides me, and will not change anything that is already embedded in my heart. It is a simple meaning to the physical eye, and a strong attraction to those looking for something by intuition or our mind's eye. As to what led to think today as yesterday, I'll be writing for you. Here goes. Intuition is no more than a quick contact formed to join the spirit when crossing the threshold of consciousness, to a certain and determined action by the physical body. From here the person to accept everything goes swimmingly. At that time the cosmic power is in person, leading her to play what was requested by the spirit. The person driving up to the instinct is now in line with the absolute power, and that dominates everything. Jos Cruz. Form up to this task is taken with accuracy and perfection, at the same time an inner desire to create increasingly accompanied by a certain inner peace. After all, it is the spirit acting through the human body and is always synchronized so that it manifests itself in what it does. How the spirit is ageless, give their time or hours for it. It's the classic sense that many people feel that time has stopped or has already realized this and is still so early. Note that after completion of request for more painful that is, one never feels tired. That level is. Why was not implementing its own power, but a cosmic energy that passed through her own. Now we have the reverse side of the coin. If the person to ignore this intuition and not let this energy flow inside to the outside, will be in trouble. Because the energy falls on the person at the time you feel your intuition telling you something. This positive energy to be retained in the physical body and not being externalized begins to bring in many instances, ill-being both physical and mental. Often manifesting itself through vomiting, nervous tension, body aches, feeling interior, associated with negativity that nothing goes wrong. And with each passing moment, if the person continues to deny, go with the auto-lock time is, and then come to suffer from energy blockages, in this case with positive energy, which for example give you heat, as is the case characteristic of, andropause, in men or the ladies in, menopause. Exemplify the case of the ladies. Reunion of light. It is known that the so-called dance of the hormones, which was the same as happened to the person when his body was turning to woman, as already explained. At the time when exemplify how acne changes the meaning of one's life itself. The person would not reach it and feel the same reason for this. Continuing to deny to an understanding with the whole, kept inside until this point. These denials repressed a lot of people call hurts, year after year. And then around that time that it is beginning to appear to whom the first wrinkles appear. What are some 30 years after the first period, these symptoms reappear. They come back to appear again as a reminder of the person. If being inside will take the trouble to change these negative pictures has caused lifelong, accepting them unconditionally. You will notice more and more a reunion with their own wrinkles fail to appear. The physical pains and other discomforts to emotional stop, coming back to take the woman to turn to the inside, turning to feel like when it was more young, depending on the dedication and love that each person has for you. Give him a call. A second adolescence, which is based on the name, as a glove. Jos Cruz. Reunion of Light. Chapter 24. Living the Second Adolescency. About the fact that I fit well and feel the sensations that although the man may feel as a woman, this was due to my previous incarnation as a woman. And these feelings and the other brought as baggage the soul, until the reality that some time ago I watched every month, with the same symptoms of a woman who lives on the physical plane. Later I can redevelop the subject more generally. The second adolescence, as understand here, is more than the need that the spirit has to evolve, thus will increasingly manifest as time passes, because it was for this that he incarnated in a physical body, due to already be a being of light, that this part is already finished. As the spirit lacks evolve in the physical plane, it will manifest as it already demined. The light. Now from here the person to be contacted by him must accept unconditionally what this offers. In this case is a sense of inner understanding that makes you feel that in time it will increasingly rise to settle through the conscience. This in turn will give their blessing to what is requested. Jos Cruz. To the extent that consciousness is becoming a stronger person begins to return to a better self-control on it that is secular. This secularism leads increasingly to a greater understanding of the anterior, similarly starting to feel more in touch with the spirit, which later on confidence returning to get a pass to the other to treat for you, so to speak. At that time he walked so many years as disaggregated the spirit returned to make peace. Reunion of Light. Chapter 25. The Call Destination. To what many people call destination, not more than a series of actions that human beings tend to develop a life force. The fate and the fate to which many people regard it as a predefined path in life from birth or other before it. There are more than a human being placed in a condition for the universe to evolve by itself and nothing else. I will mention, that this part, applied the so-called cause and effect of it. It works as follows: when the spirit has not yet been embodied in a human breast, it remains in committee. Place the light in your soul, and in the astral plane soul is preparing its next reincarnation through the spirit. In this plan it has the possibility to twist in time and see all his previous experience, from birth to physical death. Why? So she can see where mistakes had not led to a complete illumination of his soul, as with Jesus, Buddha and others who have become spiritual beings of light eternal, without the need to return to earth in human form. In this state the soul, conscious knowing where it might have evolved more and did not, then determines the universe more than the reincarnation back to planet Earth, with the term we call mission, to evolve in ways that did not earlier in reincarnation. Jos Cruz. This way you can say that it brings a predefined task to accomplish, and nothing more. But we know that is not so. For since the soul gives permission to the spirit which can embody a particular human breast, humanity as a whole has evolved. From your physical birth the spirit will begin to demand that brought him to the earth without knowing why, because this trip is all conscience him off. Getting you all the memories of previous lives trapped in the soul. The spirit remains alone in its quest. Secular is not getting carried away by the mind, easily find the way to get there. At the same time it will generate certain capabilities within themselves to take him to overcome, which in a previous life failed to materialize, about the rule of cause and effect of it. He added that people live and behave in mundane life, the law of multiplication of the universe, everything that is somehow always returns in duplicate. Hence, for whom this kind of feels, while carrying out the mission that brought him to earth, going at the same time building their own destiny. This is quite easy when we are in contact with the intimate. If this is not to insist on so to the capability of the application of conscience in everything we do. At the end of this exercise that only depends on the unique ability of each person. The following is fit to be a lifeline in accordance with his designs. For those who have forgotten what is called the rule of cause and effect, direct or indirect, will describe this example, reunion of light. If we water every day a little flower, over this act can be called the cause. As we water every day she grows up, that growth is called the effect, considering indirect effect. A direct is that is immediately before our eyes. When the flower waters them before it was dry, that gets wet, is an immediate effect. This is a practical example of what many people call destination. Jos Cruz. Reunion of Light. Chapter 26. Religion as a Business. Since ancient times that many leaders belonging to various religious and spiritual natures have been changed the religion and spirituality of the lay of it for which it was created. Many of these leaders were changed over the centuries by splitting the foundation for which had been created, by adapting it to his beautiful pleasures, transforming it into a business for profit. The religion was originally created for the purpose of explaining to people and help them understand the role of spirituality in the lives of each one. Some of these leaders are changing the religious as well as the creation of ever more churches, with the goal of the faithful monetary requirement, that many of them in most cases, or devotee fails to attend these locations when realizes that nothing he seeks is offered on a plate, has to do with religion or spirituality that much demand. Leading many people to rid themselves of families, leading them to ruin monetary, dragging them to the path of folly. Even after taking, some become aware of what happened without being able to give back to the successful, the act of suicide. Several are the bad examples of successful events coming to this part of the general knowledge of all. There is a need not give my part as well as for your lower ourselves we deserved attention to on the subject. Jos Cruz. For me that always was and is a fighter against to such the people to his similar in all respects, thus abdicated to be a frequenter of Catholic doctrine, which by it had been baptized and later married. Then I felt a revolt inside and realized that was just one more secular symbolism. I am divorced from religion altogether, but not of the faith and spirituality. Reunion of Light. Chapter 27. God. The word God was created by man as the symbol of all that is existing on earth as in heaven, but most people interpret the word differently and at the same time demanding and expecting the same by invoking it for your own benefit and doing nothing else. They are just waiting for the miracle to happen. As the human being is a being of light and has been increasingly developing this capability over reincarnations, he experiences during his earth feels out of place in this world and only cold and hostile. For whom is it going to turn? Clear to the nature of the unity that exists where it came from and where you are. Because although you do not remember, has the feeling of being part of the whole universe. That is why people when their lives destabilize instinctively turn to the all-doing prayers and looking nature. For the whole will come to fill the shortages arising from the fact that it ceased to live in the spiritual, exchanging it for the intellectual evolution. You notice that when the meter is to be after these troubles and feel you have to turn to the all, instinctively and without think, does it with his palms together and stretched out to heaven for that. Jos Cruz. As you know, this mudra has the ability to put energy into being there in connection with all. So to join in the universe, one depending on your sensibility, you can often feel the various sensations physical, mental or spiritual. That is no more energy than demonstrating that the person feels that he is being sent. It was the same as happens when a person makes a mudra. Place the open hands turned to heaven as in both hands chakra there are two very powerful or energy centers. This energy applied in love with an open heart will then flow to the entire universe palms, thus covering the whole body, and making people feel many different sensations, tremors, heat, cold, chills, changes in behavior, attitudes, hunger, thirst, physiological needs, visions, dizziness and even fainting when the flow of energy is great, and the person is weak or does not have the energy channels open. Reunion of Light. Chapter 28. Faith. Faith is no more than but believe in their own capabilities to achieve a certain objective and determined, is in the spiritual, physical or mental. The being has the perception of being supported by something. The universe. How does one apply when the feeling of conscious faith is because he feels the need for something and how restricted their mind, it cannot conceive of such a request, being about to turn to the whole. Faced with such a request as it exemplifies how formally, when this need that part of the mind, because it is who has the need to evolve from hierarchically below the filter of conscience, and if it finds that the request has legs to walk the same in turn transmits it to the spirit, which is always in the application form will light soul. That is how it is that the judge of all this evaluation, after examining the request leaves mature for some time, which can be moments, days, years or centuries. After their maturation and writing to all always eternal and infinite in its heart of light, it gives permission to the spirit come down on the return and will be the request by instinct, to its implementation, without going through conscience. Jos Cruz. That is why many people are sometimes made to do something unthinkable, and insignificant in your life due to, but a day later because it is intuitively feel that this has been provided. If the person identifies him immediately, then it has to do with this life, living earth, which was a previous request, if not identified as such. It was a reincarnation of a previous request that the soul was ordered to be placed at the disposal of, so that it identifies as a sign for your application and give its resulting evolution. As is the case with many children who have young children, without yet having learned to speak and have not yet reached the age to attend school without ever having taught them show detailed knowledge on all kinds of issues that many adults are experts in these areas, a real puzzle. As is the case, more and more children from the time they begin to speak in various languages, getting parents and too impressed with that fact that in most cases is not understood by them. But for those who feel these things is nothing more than an order of the soul to still be that small, that through him that many people call it a gift, will inform the world that, for its increasing development as a future recognition of being, this type message that you can call as such, has the mission to be spreading throughout the world. People come to understand each other. For this message be conveyed that early and good company to do so by law, to be instructed as to the extent that is growing in all aspects, will become a global communicator. Like Jesus, Buddha and others, some popes. Reunion of light. Because this child was born with open channels through which it passes all the necessary energy that will be channeled to the outside, in many different ways. As some will even happen with Mother Teresa of Calcutta. As always had this energy channel open at the top of the head, which many people flame brains that can feel and see your sink after the birth of any baby, never having closed, even until after his physical death. To be in constant contact with the source of light was in the same way that the universe has added another pillar where energy is already refined spiritual light, as with the pyramids in Egypt and other sacred places. Jos Cruz. Reunion of Light. Chapter 29. Channel the Healing. Over time I have opted to develop in different ways how to treat and cure some patients, through the enlightenment which was given me by the universe. I appreciated that the greater the intellect of the person itself is more difficult to cure. Why? Because there is the old story which I have come to rely on, the mind, that the more one lives in the mind, unless you live spiritually. These beings, for having become accustomed to living in mind and familiarize yourself, thinking, as part of it is finding it hard to admit something that escape the reasoning. Some of the point of feeling the need to heal through it, but only when a rule resort are already in medical incurable, an intellectual class and come looking for the so-called miracle. This type of blind people who still walk in the mind of ignorance, says that like most people is the blind who does not want to see. He was in many cases able to access it due to the stupid pride that people keep under lock and key inside. Of course I had to initiate a more refined form of energy do these passages. Calculate that there is even at death's door people who would like to be healed without being touched by hands called energy, or that many people identify as the hands of God. Jos Cruz. As I said earlier, is a physical channel through which energy can pass, also called the love. In the past, when development passes energy to others through the known method Reiki, I noticed that some of them did not feel very comfortable, now with the fact that they played, sometimes with a towel to separate the hands of the area to be treated, other even just playing into the hands of themselves for some more intimate body parts, even with assistance nearby. Although it is known that not only before starting any treatment or cure process is the foundation trust deposited in the person doing the treatment. That is usually preceded with an always good dialogue, as is known. Patients felt physically at ease and relaxed. But his private parts, many times I felt the fear that came from there. I leave this exercise for you doings. Why? Now discover, and respond to yourself without any malice. With others it was completely adverse, and these are treated more quickly, with less suffering, and awoke to the reality that was happening to them. But the technical performance of the experts know how Reiki can be done in other ways, without having to touch the hands of so little, even if the distance may have treatment without the patient present or objects, through the so-called tuning. All the way in developments in this area experienced and exhaustively analyzed every possible way for a proper application of this technique to the fullest. Without ever achieved, would even abandon it. Until one day my spirit was enlightened me, saying that the formula to achieve this objective it felt like a tool if it is, that I was missing, it had already used in a previous reincarnation. Reunion of Light. Chapter 30. The Power to Go Beyond. Following my intuition took me to practice this new form of energy application to patients. Of course the result was what I was looking for. How do I apply this technique that has become familiar to me, but for many beings in the same area may become a little difficult or not? It is time for them to improve, if I do understand. But that after this explanation simple enough will certainly realize, with great results, just by practicing and add to the model of work that have been developing. Thank you. So this is my dearest dear brothers and light. Before any treatment is generally known as it should be a very open dialogue, clear, pure, honest, and disinterested in any monetary or other allowance. Taking the patient to put yourself more relaxed in every way, taking the same every time that they rely more on who you will move, in one form or another that it is most holy, life. Jos Cruz. When the patient is already prepared then starts the session. So far so good, the patient opens up to you but only outwardly. A party to the therapist in these conditions often cannot reach, is the spirit of the patient. And as we know from there is any healing begins to reach the soul. This light energy that will reach the soul is only possible in times of no mind. If who is doing this passage can trigger energy at the time he developed a means, never allowing the patient to fall asleep at any time, keeping it in constant dialogue or otherwise awake. And during this dialogue while his hands work, you must at the same time develop the ability to penetrate into the spirit of the patient through the power of visualization in times of no mind. Eventually the mind will be more soothing and facilitating the work of the performer. The mind calms down due to a more subtle energy input, to that which is normally used to feed themselves, who for years was to suck the patient. Since the mind is stupid to this part, not knowing whether or not the energy comes from that feeds the body, and just feels better and disarms. Good is always the moment that the guys who will feel these things as well as it sees waiting. When this is so, is the so-called gold on blue. Thank you. Reunion of Light. Chapter 31. My technique. Due to the uncomfortable feel that my patients to demonstrate the intimate level, this part of spores to the outside to enter it, when I began to feel uncomfortable with this situation also. I asked my spirit helps one to this part, while I was waiting for your message back. I could have time to go deeper in a little more than me about this situation. I found that people in general have increasingly more likely to self-heal themselves, due to the evolution of the hold to which they are taken unconsciously. And many have begun to awaken the conscience, and I will be ashamed of using the medical profession as well as other classes in health. These people and try and go as they try to soft stopping the unconscious mind, and giving a small place conscience, which in turn asks faith, and as she grows up people go back to identify old stimuli which is in his heart. Jos Cruz. That after one day feel your intuition come to realize that it asks, are driven by this intuition to awaken your consciousness in all its fullness, and often without consent, so they are already beginning to tread the beginning of sometimes a long walk. People just need something or someone that makes them wake up. Even if it is an insect bite or a color of a flower, a ray of sunlight for example, among many other possibilities that have to wake up to the God that is within each one. Just simply be a small click on you and even be identified and nurtured with love and humility with conscience. This can either click come from within, for example a vibration of something that may even correspond to a musical note, as just get close to someone who already has some noticeable vibration. Or just a simple word that is written in a book somewhere, but it was somehow touched by the meaning of that word, or something more subtle. That something more subtle, I have come to pass, for example you one way or another are likely to be touched and awakened, or this subtle energy emanating from the universe that I have the ability to put this book that will circulate throughout the world. Thank you. Reunion of Light. Chapter 32. A New Tool. After receiving the response to my request, to perfect the method of assisting people, he became a new tool with more power, passing this way to use it more accurately. I had to do a refinement of what I was taught by the Spirit, because he never found a spiritual master who accepts me as a disciple. The few who always knew they refused to accept me as a student. Others died of advanced age, have not given me much help, but the little they gave me I still keep forever in my heart. Then one day I realized I was looking for the spiritual master lived inside my soul. Says an ancient Hindu proverb that when the student is ready the master appears, was what happened to me. A more refined way that was described to me was that people begin to heal those who are looking for me, just going directly to the Spirit without the need for application of hands. What comforts me a lot, because I no longer depend on the physical action and its disorders. Jos Cruz. Let me turn generated more power dressing, with which I can always count on, this refinement penetrate me again in my life sacred. That just simply be talking to a person affected, soon to be tuned in sync with the level of spiritual light, immediately entering the same in person, triggering the beginning of the healing process. If called by the gift that words have, this happens as you know, that they have this loving vibration, and that in reaching such a person in the middle of the forehead, known as chakra, the third eye energy. Or if you are using the same light that shines from aura. For now we are here. Thank you. Reunion of Light. Chapter 33. The Power of Light. It has previously focused light, the subject, several times, without even having a little deeper for you. So here goes. The natural light that enlightens us, whether from the sun or the planet Moon, have their various influences in humans, either directly or indirectly. Sunlight is a positive light which radiates warm sunlight, who feeds all living things existing at the surface of planet Earth. Plants that when sunbathing are all delighted, as is the case of sunflowers as its name indicates, it turns by itself following the solar motion. The animals that differ only by man's lack of awareness during the day will also accompany the rotation of the sun, moving several times a day each. When they are released, which is the case with is which when they get to be with heat seeking negative energy to rebalance, or shade or water. Jos Cruz. And the human being who has conscience and is rational, it should at least get daily sunlight at least 20 minutes a day for food and purification of cells scattered throughout the body, as I mentioned in an earlier chapter, how it works, remember. Good. And as these cells to be charged with positive energy, which circulate in the physical body, keeps us warm and nimble in turn, while the individual, remain in daily contact with a part of the light from the source from which it came. This is to remember that we are beings in a way that solar we named human. This light gives us all the union with air or prana. Any human being can live without some more solid food or liquid. Will not now bring myself to explain all the elements and their components, where the air but would have to write a supplement to this book. I hope you understand, and who do not already know, find a good book in this area. From that we are beings of light, we feel refreshed and happy when we abandoned it. For those who still persist any questions, I offer the example of primary school children on the playground, because by then they still have not learned to think, and just acting on instinct, and not yet the time to have messages through intuition. You see the movie. The day is sun, the gang run, jump, play is line 30, never get bored. Who do not remember these moments of complete happiness? It has been for me so many years, but will write about it, yet I feel like at that time. These good times were always interrupted by the ringing of the bell. Now back to school the other day, it is raining. Reunion of Light. Soon the gang is depressed, but even with this state of mind, will always instinctively trying to look outside to see if the weather has improved and his friend's son now has the air of his grace. But the bell rings, the kids jump out, but his biggest fear continues to persist. It continues to rain and son does not see it. The gang was already feeling a bit depressed but had hope in the game. Not the case now joins their sorrow, accompanied by a certain cold inside, and you do not laugh so much, many of them are even grim. This is a day in terms of energy felt by children instinctively like a day with plenty of negative energy, which does not feel much at ease. Still miss the touch of light and warmth of Mother Nature. We are now going to the moon. Also emanate two things, like the sun. The moon sends us at certain times of the light cycle, albeit weaker, but nevertheless be light. This is the same light when it is stronger and focuses on the pituitary gland of humans, putting them more restless at night, causing them to so-called insomnia. What many people do not know why, leading many young people seeking their pituitary gland, did not adapt to this light into depression and often suicide. Although it is light, but comes from a planet cold negative, which in its descent behind the cold negative. But of course this pole is necessary to balance the Earth and its inhabitants. Otherwise the Earth with the solar heat would burn. Both the material part of the constitution on Earth, we find the positive, which is the heat that emanates from within or through the volcanoes of plate motion. The negative pole exists on how ice turns into water after thawing. Jos Cruz. This is how the moon is manifested in matter. But so is through the corresponding part of the astral plane influential or decision-making that exists in humans. This energy is more subtle than the positive in some part to a better understanding, finer, elegant as it were, that to be called the feminine energy, being associated with women. Now as you know both the man and the woman both need, they give the men are stronger physically, by being governed by a great deal of energy material, and generally less developed spiritually. The negative is that the woman represents the spiritual belonging. Hence the calling female. This type of energy is less powerful than the male, but more that the same decision-making. Only spiritually astral allies visited by the iterations of the spirit to the physical body, for example. The woman who else is in short feel these provisions, it is the transport vehicle for this type of energy. Because the woman belonging to the provisions of the moon is that it is so negative, reflecting itself in such cold, because the left side is connected with the brain's right side, taking over the ladies to breathe through the left nostril. While men are less likely to be negative in general, contracting in fewer colds by more breathe through the right nostril that represents the portion solar. Thank you and good night. Reunion of Light. Chapter 34. Eating Habits. As already described, the habits are created by the mind. Through the thoughts that lead to physical acts, emotions, dependencies, etc., when left to be consciously controlled, transform people's lives in a true chaos. Among the more varied are the eating habits. That when applying the old adage that you live to eat and not eat to live, bring all sorts of trouble. There are several types of power, but for now I'll just look a little bit about solid foods or liquids that are in the maintenance of the human body. As I realized, I have been through an example of what I write often, children. Because besides being through them I feel more accomplished in what I do, it's still the best examples, as well as the basis of the future. Thank you. Who does not remember when I was little, when he tried to enforce some kind of food to which they refused? Then they would eat anything else, had never played or when hungry, and when did sometimes eat sporadically. And when they did not pay much attention to the selection criterion or proof, just go directly to that gave it a feeling of complete feed. Jos Cruz. And did not die of starvation or diseases developed, as with those who are forced in one way or another to eat what others think they should eat. The child who is in contact with the interior and later as an adult tends to maintain this behavior. It's healthier than others. Because only eat what your conscience dictates and never more than whatever it is, as by intuition choose the types of foods that suit your needs, by keeping an ideal weight compatible with their height and age. As will unconsciously keeping away schedules, which are habits, only feeding when they are perceived to do so. This type of people who eat consciously as adults, tend to make the moment of a ritual meal. Seek a quiet place, preferably in communion with nature if they are not alone, either with same scope, calm and the time required doing so. In order to enjoy all that this noble act conceives them, these people chew very slowly in order to appreciate the real value of the food they eat. By doing so they eat less because the body takes about 10 minutes to send a message to the brain that is being fed. After this happens, consciousness takes over the body in the process of quantity. Because it is of note that only the start of meals is that it has more taste. It happens because as the food is part of nature, has the essence that connects with the spirit. That means that when a meal is consciously extended also to feed the spirit. No food but because we are in conscience, not thinking about anything, is a meditation. It is a meditation that somehow feeds the spirit through consciousness. Because by being out of mind there are no clouds of thoughts. Reunion of light. There are no thoughts that will give energy circulates in the light, turning this way, feeding the spirit with positive energy, which immediately transforms it into more light, increasing the size and quality of aura energy, and taking a part already refined to the core. Jos Cruz. Reunion of Light. Chapter 35. The Fasting of the Soul. About this topic I'm going to tell you something that I have called the process. At one point in my life story, ate a lot more, weighing up to 35 pounds to normal weight. I had to change eating habits as well as others, that the soft and squishy for a few years regained my ideal weight. As throughout my life had created a number of health problems, I was slowly losing weight conscious. But always standing behind was not to acquire more problems I already had, until the end of half a dozen years, and having already acquired the normal weight for me. That was not easy because of my friend mind, but I managed to emerge victorious from such. By the time then something happened to me today I feel like sacred. Over time I began to lose the taste without knowing why. I turned then and after the medical examinations and tests. I was not diagnosed with any health problem. They told me they did not know what led to this failure to the sensitivity of taste. Jos Cruz. And over time did not taste like I was rediscovering the true essence of the taste of food, but unconsciously. From then on I began to feel the body rejects certain types of food and food that even previously loved. Never understand why. Today I know that taste is constructed by the mind. It was coffee, meat, fish, alcoholic beverages, etc. Going increasingly eating by intuition what kept me at the top of the earth without knowing why. He felt that one thing that I had to keep myself entertained, and this time he ate little and had sometimes taste. I began to feel this way. I was nourishing my consciousness, with which I began to identify more and more, because after I felt good, nurturing in all aspects. Other times I wandered a bit, leading me to eat without knowing why more and more quickly, and then suffered the consequences. Of course, bad provisions, both physical and mental, was instability of the thyroid gland. Until one day I found myself confronted with the whole situation. Part of my intellectual as well as the medical profession had not been answered. I do not. Result hated me seriously with my great friend and let the mind simply to eat and drink. Not knowing if one day come back to do it or not, I just feed on prana. I was then the first week without eating anything solid or liquid, and for another 3 weeks just by drinking a cup of warm water for days and catching sun at least 20 minutes a day, sunrise, sunset and the same. By the time I learned to breathe there with dignity by prana, only food, and nothing more, always playing my professional life, as well as a sport. Since all witnessed both the soulmate who accompanies me since several years, as other people who witnessed the whole process that gave the same name, the one who identified as being God's call. Reunion of light. Here because I just felt that I was free to do as queen of the mind forever, the same course that still lives within me. When it accurate to call it and treating it only as a servant. During this process which I had with the mind, far more advanced than I was, feeling that he was in communion with something sacred and kept me without any pain or cost at any level. as started just after exactly 4 weeks, no less, I felt I had completed the process of cleanup of my being in all respects. Come me to make you feel young again at any time, which at first I was a little confused because my life is dealing more with adults, they forgot that they were happy as children. Passing often make them feel like it without them knowing. This is one of the powers that could develop and apply. Jos Cruz. Reunion of Light. Chapter 36. How to Stop the 1001st. The mind, as I said before and I explained very well. There is more than one mechanism. A nearly perfect mechanism, because if it were not the same we evolve as humans. Like any mechanism, a human being who ever was a child, and unconsciously shut down, now as an adult will have to relearn how to turn it off, but now consciously. This is the great challenge that human beings are led to make in each reincarnation, until one day be able to develop both the mind and control it as many people already do with spirit and the physical body, leading to a perfect union with the universe, as a way of holding the rise as many spiritual beings or enlightened beings. Thank you. The mind as we know is located in the head. But I'll give you an example of the legs, as the mind is also a mechanism. As in the primary lessons we learn, and adults learn or teach ourselves to do both, because they are acts, just by watching others. These acts of execution order is sent by the mind through various channels to members. We will focus only on the legs. When the consciousness that need legs to walk the same calls to mind, that is the bossy in most cases the physical body, to send a message to the legs through the nervous system, which in turn sends to the muscles and from then triggers the so-called walking. Jos Cruz. When to stop is the same. As noticed, there were 2 orders set so that the mechanism works. This means that a mechanism is referred to as the orders are nothing more than a switch type, as the existing home turns on and off when needed, or to turn off the light. Likewise with the mind, that is turned on and off by conscience. You notice that when we sit on a bench or chair, legs automatically stop. With the mind must be the same. Conscience tells him to stop thinking about it, and most times it does not stop. This explanation is that brings me nearer to you. It does not stop because in their eagerness to get her mad repetitiveness to itself. That's when the conscience loses control of the mind. It's like a wild horse that is loose, do not know where to go. It is traditionally said to what that person is crazy and has no government of its own, as is the same mechanism can be repaired when your state still allows you to do. Let's go and get it repaired. If reached here we'll continue. The mechanism, that is how I will refer from now, is an excellent producer of thoughts, which even without you wanting them to continue to manufacture. One approach is one that has already described how you stop the song in mind. Remember. Reunion of Light. Chapter 37. Habits. They are repetitive thoughts that will slowly turn into habits. A habit to be embedded in the mind takes exactly 4 weeks to materialize. And to be rooted forever is just 1 more week. This is about 5 weeks that it takes to be forever etched in the mind, 5 weeks. By staying forever etched in the mind can never remove it. How do you give back to the mechanism? The mechanism is already used to working at their own pace, thus we cannot slow down, because if you break the rhythm he simply stops and give their most harmful consequences. Then we proceed as follows. Let's create a new habit. It's just how you can fool the mechanism. As he is used increasingly to have more power, we give it to them. But on one condition: that habit is done under the supervision of consciousness. The mechanism is as stupid gets greedy, only turn him looking through the call also generated by illusion, he falls into his own trap of accepting the agreement. From here you have to knife and cheese in hand. Jos Cruz. Although it is often difficult to discover the form and have the strength to cut, so to speak, where the cheese ye want. But one thing may be right, ye have everything needed to make this change. And these possibilities are never far away, because after all that ye were made this cheese, consciously. Reunion of Light. Chapter 38. The Power of Laughter. Who does not remember as a child to laugh about something, or even out of nothing, and his own. Well, dear friends, have been through this journey in which I have been a beacon to help you rediscover who you are themselves in many different ways and examples, treating them only as you feel, children in adult bodies waiting to be loved for yourselves. Thank you. The act of laughing can be applied in many shapes and forms for many different purposes, and all applications that only make him feel good in all aspects. So, what is the laughter and how it works? The power that exists in laughter is powered by the energy in the universe, which is love. This loving energy is triggered by the vibration of the physical and celestial bodies, and goes back into cyclical movements, which often give us the laugh longer feel as if your head in the air and spinning. Jos Cruz. It is the union of the physical energy to heaven, who can be identified as a light vibration that produces energy, which manifests as the physical body contact that vibration more salient in the face as it is to repair. The person is never quiet, because it is a vibration complete you can come by and will head to toe, always continuing to circulate while the act of laughter persists. I should add that for those who do not know that this type of energy is due to its higher vibration than that to which the body is accustomed to eating, for something that when you laugh in the least mind simply stops. Try and feel. This is one of the therapies that always advise my patients. Many of them no longer know how to laugh. Oh, 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 more or less so depends on the joker. The act of laughing is also one of the best exercises for the whole body to face. For example, every person who laughs is always more energetic and more willing and more beautiful, because there is greater blood flow, even for the mind to stop, rests thus getting more energized, and as a means of communication and understanding is not falling behind. As the power is proven that laughter has tended to spread, more laughs more it spreads, more and more reaching others in the universe through the vibration of bodies. For all this and more by what is not written here, I leave you to your inner child, the challenger to each of you back to laugh, and smile at the inside of, and more cheerful as you can find in your deepest self. Not that this will walk with a smile from ear to ear, laughed at those who laugh at themselves. Reunion of light. A county of the heart, when you feel angry, sad, lonely, abandoned, unlucky, or thoughts that do not want to have, or even crying, headaches, malaise, etc., everything that has to do with negativity. Just replace what is felt by smile. Remember anything that awakens within him the click of laughter. And you'll see that your mood changes right away. If you do not take a course to laughter himself, even if it is in front of a mirror, to develop the technique and learn to laugh like a pro, because one day we will meet and recognize each other by the smile. Jos Cruz. Reunion of Light. Chapter 39. The Feed. Good morning. Everything that is excessive is harmful. How many people that after a meal feel more tired than before? Why? These people usually spend more time than they should not eat, and during this time in one form or another have struggled more than they should, often spending their meager energy reserves. Because the food is no more than a reserve of energy accumulated in the body. I'll give you a classic example of prevailing on the day-to-day people. The person walks in a day to her transfixed, at this point do not feel like eating or hunger, and feel the energy flowing through your whole body, is happy with herself without realizing it is in contact with the whole, but as the person used to use an implement called social clock, developed certain habits from it. And then you notice that there is at lunch. There will then consciously lunch. After it returns to its normal life, and will continue to do what stopped for lunch. The general layout remains the same as before lunch. Jos Cruz. So far all within the line know the power generated by biorhythm in union with the cosmos continues to maintain a balanced person. But from one moment to another function that is playing, it requires more energy than normal is being consumed. One needs to increase output quickly, and then go get that extra energy it needs, and that are stored in cells, and which are nothing more than food, protein and vitamins on the form of ingested food material, All normal so far. But assuming that deplete your energy reserves, or the person back to replace them immediately in accordance with his conscience, and this can be served the order to do so. Or just as consciously controlling the energy you feel weak in the physical body and that will reset later, great. Now let's turn that until now was paradise and we will begin to walk in hell. One does not put back the energy expended in due course, and begins to lose ground consciousness to the mind. The latter in turn is negative but thrives on positive energy. It will start attacking the body through the nervous system, which even after the sub is also a mechanism controlled by the mind. The person will consume some energy, still maintains it. Be consumed after that the organs do not have more energy to stay, and then gets the famous and well-known stomach pain, among others, taking one more to feel more nervous, nausea, headaches and general ill health. In short, the person is discharged energetically, maintained only without knowing why. This is the reason why, being a spiritual being, then one can begin to eat there, as the mind is starved of energy, and the entire mechanisms dependent on it, eats everything and anything quickly. Reunion of light. Since the mind is always repetitive, want more food, and the person is eating more and more just by eating. But insofar as they will gorge, the mind goes back to having enough energy for its maintenance. So the mind is satisfied, as we will lose power to the consciousness. What once took command will soon be right thyroid gland to the regulatory body for this case, after receiving an order of consciousness, will immediately order the agency to release stomach, a feeling of being full, already no longer fit or have nothing to feel satisfied, and though a person stops eating. But the worst in most cases is done, eaten in excess, and not giving this exhaust the excess energy, which is too much in the physical body, leading to a super effort all the mechanisms and internal organs in order to eliminate the ingested excessively. As the body has not had the time to make this deletion, it calls digestion, will have to resort to such cosmic energy. How does this happen? Who has not noticed someone who has a habit of not eating and stood up immediately to make and simply fall asleep? It happens even more after dinner. Well, even if people stubbornly refuse to admit that there is something superior to his intellect, energy also reaches heaven, and in the following way. The person to fall asleep when the mind does not dream stops, giving rise to the body to relax, and to this end, cosmic energy penetrated through the energy centers, which will then spread throughout the body and thus helping to restore person's energy. Jos Cruz. We took in consciousness and analyzed the following, which is eaten in excess. As he says, the fault is not doing more, and more is going to have to be removed. The body, to remove this excess, will be required to work overtime. These hours will be paid through the energy that circulates in the organic chain, later to be his energy reserves. Because of having to serve it later, the body will need it. Hence the old saying, the more you feel like eating more food. It can be concluded that the body for its maintenance would require only 50% of what we ate, therefore the other 50% surplus for disposal will spend the first 50%. Thus half of what you eat is not more than once turned into energy, to become the other half to digest, feel it. Reunion of light. Chapter 40. The meditation. The act of meditating is not to be more than being in union with the universe. That way someone seeks to go beyond what is physical, and meet the divine within himself and ended the universe. That after reaching the union and sits on part of the union, meditation is more than a state of higher consciousness. Be aware. By being aware of what goes on inside and the outside will be increasingly developing their awareness, give more to discern right from wrong through the line that will develop over the interior. In short, meditation is to be aware of what is going on without interfering. Never happens. Only, and should not just be an observer, without going to intervene or to judge what is going on. If it will not trigger a process in which the mind is the judge, and which does not want anything at this point, much less this kind of observation. Follow the steps I mentioned earlier to stop or slow down the mind that is the worst opponent of meditation. Jos Cruz. which just be ignored, and we continue to observe all that are products manufactured by it. Thoughts. And they were always present in the form completely black or sky or clouds. To the extent that that person wills increasingly developing their awareness, disappear giving way to increasingly infinite light. Reunion of light. Chapter 41. The meditation. As mentioned earlier, the act of meditation is nothing more than to be conscious. As such, anyone can do in various positions in ways that feel more relaxed. These positions are lying, standing, sitting. Just adopt a way of being that does not bring you physical exertion. Just as the choice of location, each must be looking for the ideal place for intuition in which you feel in union with the All. Usually these sites are belonging more of nature, as a field, beach, or a place of their habitation, a place where you feel at peace with the whole. All beings are different from each other, and meditation techniques that can be healthy for some, for others may not feel like the most correct for you. It is the time to discover for yourselves the techniques best suited to each one of you, to serve as the intuitive power that has always existed within you. Never force anything. Many people identify a person who meditates or property is in a position for some time as a lazy person. Jos Cruz. Never mind, because this trial comes from the mind of the same. They are not lazy. Just do not feel that the fact of being motionless for some time is not easy for beginners. Stop the mind, feel the body, all that is physical as well as all the energy that circulates within each one, and keep serene, without connecting to anything. Just be an observer, has nothing to do with laziness. These commentators half bowl, which will then have the experience that is not quite as well, think. After having already found the place and the most comfortable position for each, which can be in many different ways, accompanied or not, if accompanied by noise and should never be with you, body touches, with or without cushions, a chair or bed in floor, how do you feel better? From here continue with your intuition to discover what the best way or technique to relax the body and mind. To do so we'll have to focus on something with your eyes closed forever. That something is going to be your inner guide, can be heard all the noise outside without identifying them or just listening to focus on your breathing. The air entering and air leaves as well as its retention is only an observer, or just watch your abdomen up and down. If this is difficult, to put your hands over the same position or mudra feel better. Another way, if lying becomes more relaxed, feel the energy circulating in the body. This position may seem easy, and partly with regard to the physical part, but in the beginning how the body is accustomed to going to bed only for sleeping, is likely to fall asleep sometimes, but not be alarmed by this, that over time the body will accept this new position, or habit eventually get used to it, losing the habit of going to sleep. Reunion of light. These forms of meditation as well as others that are staying with the body still are described as passive meditations. For people who are calmer, or who feel they want to develop this aspect of calm inside. Jos Cruz. Reunion of light. Chapter 42. Active meditations. These techniques are called so because they belong to the physical, whether passive or active end is always the same, out of mind, the physical. The active meditations can be certain of the most developed forms or ordinances. As I said earlier, is only necessary for its perfect execution. Be wary of everything that makes up the smallest detail in your life, just feeling like an observer and nothing more. I say no more, felt. These meditations can be practiced, for example when walking. The person must be the most aware of the way he walks, at every step feel every movement that your body does to do. When you put your foot on the ground, feel the pressure that makes it against the ground, feel the lifting of the foot behind us and the whole movement of the knees and the entire leg. With the starting time will unconsciously give attention to how you breathe, later consciously evolving to give that part too. Feel all synchronization in every movement you do. Develop this practice, always consciously, either when you are walking, driving, eating, bathing, talking, listening, work, etc. Do everything done as well, but make a good professional. Feel this way so that it is the consciousness rises higher and higher. Jos Cruz. When a person has a certain profession and determined to have to be responsible for as much as possible, going to increasingly perfected in their execution, so that will not lose to another that performs better than him. For this she always equips the most out of your consciousness in every detail, is awake. Assuming that this was the profession that you chose, this person feel happy to play, reaching the end of the day without showing fatigue. This is where the good people leave the area in which it is, for older people physically, and to walk you looking for feel better about them. Do the meditation of the dance the same way, conscious of every movement of your body during the dance, is one of the strongest ways to meditate there, because you need to dance music, the music and not the chords, the verses of a song, because it's captured by the mind. Only music that your vibration in the physical body does move more the person. We just have to go with the vibe and taste of music without fear, but always keeping aware, and increasingly his every move body does. Just by watching, never judging or whatever it is, changing the rhythm created by the body, just let go by the power of vibration that exists in the music that plays on the body. You notice that when people begin to enter middle age, begin to look more and more dances. Because at that time people just what they want is to feel this vibration in them and nothing more, although most did not know what leads to these places. Many people like them as meeting places for those people who feel more in solitude. It are mistaken. Reunion of light. That although these people feel impelled by his intuition to attend such recreational places, in an unconscious way to do it, but do it, and then feel happy inside, often was not the company. What many of them when they do not pair up to dance alone. This is the invitation energy. Do it alone and dance wherever, and never repress any desire to be, because it is your inner child to come forward who wants attention from his mother. Thank you all for listening to me. What is in his heart? Jos Cruz. Reunion of Light. Chapter 43. How to suppress the pain. The pains are that they are in nature, always have their origin in mind. This beautiful mechanism, when properly controlled by the consciousness, when an organ or member has a problem, they send a signal in the form of pain, to highlight awareness of that member or organ is in trouble. Consciousness from here, will begin to investigate this problem was due. After doing the analysis, she will say to the mind why this happened. That's why sometimes you hear different voices in your head, is not more than the consciousness and the mind to talk with one another to reach a consensus and resolve a situation. After reaching an agreement, such voices tend to be silent. When the supremacy of the mind is above, leads to the disease. When the consciousness is leads right away, the best way to resolve the situation normalizes it. And the case is not too serious, just enough consciousness to identify how that happened, and so the pain disappears. But if the pain has already won, roots will give a little more work. How do we solve this problem then? Of course, many people say the pain does not come, but they come up and good with shapes and colors depending on your state. Starting to cure what is ailing, we first identify the pain and know it better. Jos Cruz. Just by closing your eyes and we focus attention on the affected area, that consciousness shows us the same type infrared. The pain manifests itself in cyclical movements. While viewing the pain was accompanied by his entire consciousness movement, and their soft colors and soft is beginning to unite with the same even before it was lowly. Why is it spread? And this time we will not give you an injection of love. Or as she was born due to lack of love of being affected by the party, which may have been consciously or unconsciously. So we'll love it as much, from that moment to feel it no longer is no longer just spreading more. Now go make your recovery. From here there are already the necessary ingredients to do so, must then accompany her mingling more with her as part of it. But she still continues to persist in existence. This happens because they have been a long time alone, not yet identified the consciousness, so we'll give you a sign that they are there to help you stop loneliness. Who has not gone through the discomfort of having a cambria? It happens because the organ or muscle is no longer irrigated by the blood system, thereby causing a muscle contraction. The muscle is tense, causing pain. That after its relaxation back to normal. One way to get back to normal, it may simply be the most contracting the muscle, causing even more pain. Maintaining this contraction only by the sequence of 3 to 4 minutes is the maximum time it takes the blood to injecting a larger amount of blood that will reach the muscle. After finishing these minutes, simply release the pain of the most instantly totally relaxed muscle. The pain is released on her own. Reunion of light. Now that you know how to increase a pain consciously, so let's end the pain of loneliness. You know it's just getting the most out and drop. She goes away. Thus the body itself will proceed immediately to repair it by him, to restore all that was lost over time in the affected area, is likely to restore as quickly as possible. When the pain is long routed in a specific organ, after she left, still occasionally misses who welcomed so well for so long, and even completely forget the place she insists from time to time to appear. But it's nothing serious, is just visiting, and it is not only a symptom of a passenger, because she knows she is being observed by consciousness, that over time no longer appears completely, becoming a cold case. Jos Cruz. Reunion of Light. Chapter 44. The Memory of Soul. The soul has a memory which contains all events more relevant of all previous reincarnations until the present life. This is for what? For being from the moment that this life has evolved everything that can evolve as a human being, which was due in the intellectual part, can then evolve in the spiritual realm. It is this memory that is kept throughout the evolution of being, that over the lives that have been keeping memories was that one way or another helped him climb the evolution. It is known that many people, especially those who give more value to the intellect than to the spiritual, do not believe in previous experiences. Also, all my respect for these people. But then how do these people explain certain feelings that are familiar, when they meet someone they have never seen this life? Or they are doing something they have never made this experience? As well as reaching a certain place, that this experience is not remembered, but have the feeling of having been there already? Jos Cruz. Further, they have already lived another life, as I do often have the perception of having been one of the previous reincarnations as Hindu spiritual teacher, as well as views of the same. Only in this way have evolved as many facts as splitting and accumulating knowledge, and apply them. Which lead me to treat people today without my being for years have studied every part I have been developing in this dedication, that my meager studies as a child were not more than the old for the grade. Only a few years since I had promised my late mother, then went back to school. Not only because it had promised, but just felt a need to update that part. And during the term of a school year, I went from old 4th grade to the current 9th grade, with access to the 12th year with the largest facilities of life, was as it was previously written a so-called Book of Life, which is not more than the memory of the soul. How do explain this? Through what is not learned intellectually? Because the mechanism of the mind ceases once the body stops, because as mentioned the mind is simply a mechanism. What stops after physical death, as evidenced by supermedical researchers? They also underline the fact that this mechanism does not have feelings. These sensations can reach us only through the spiritual channel. Give people who are not there to face never less or more have felt something, because they live to 100% in the mind or intellectual, as you want to dub. How do you access this memory? Reunion of light. To the extent that will be developing all of its capabilities as being. A large door will start to open, within him. This port, as it will ever open again, it will miss the eternal light which bathes your soul. Over time, through so-called astral travel, being slowly begins to identify the images that are always colorful, because they are bathed in light from various colors and shades, the colors of the rainbow. Unlike dreams are black and white. This identification is only possible without the presence of mind or their associates. To the extent that it will be increasingly identifying with the views that see through the so-called third vision, or that their chakra crown atop the head. Taking enjoy everything that happened in previous reincarnations, and the next, where appropriate, who was and who will be. From that time being as it is advanced to a higher plane which already has no way of turning back. Because from that moment awareness for, and be compelled to discern because it failed to improve spiritually in their previous lives, and how it will evolve and repeat if necessary there is a next reincarnation. It is this space in time of the cosmos infinite, which spiritually advanced beings, spiritual scientists across multiple reincarnations of their land, gave the name of the committee. After these contacts are made through the meditative term is returned to its base on Earth, to apply what he saw during this trip astral, many of the times to repair some damage that existed in previous lives, as well as a change in certain ways of being in life, or to prepare a future reincarnation. Jos Cruz. Reunion of Light. Chapter 45. Do not live in 1001st. This is possible from the moment that people do not live in the mind and the products it makes. What are the pride, the intellectual, social status, emotions, ego, thoughts, illusions, not wanting to be perfect at what they do at 100%, because perfection lives in mind. Exchange certain habits that lead to depend on whatever it is or who it is. Do not envy what the neighbors have or not have. Give up all that is superfluous, since just having to live and what is necessary to your residence as well as those that depend on it. Let go of all that is material in excess, will only possess the necessary life ground. And realize that everything that comes to creating material, she cannot bring himself when he dies physically. If it were a coffin in many cases would have to be a very large coffin to hold such stuff, the person to get rid of all these chains that held her prisoner consciousness. Back to taste the freedom to rediscover with whoever is in reality and not with the illusions described above, which are created by the mind. Jos Cruz. Again it makes us missing and could not live without it. But semicolon. It only comes into play when we want and nothing else. It's like your legs, remember. Once a person to go at their own pace by breaking these bonds, will become increasingly identified with his inner being. This will giving you a growing self-confidence and extend it to your self-esteem, feeling more and more, a great inner peace. This great inner peace, you will rediscover the mixed feelings in your heart and why you appear out of nowhere. Developing every day that passes is consciously or unconsciously, harmony, compassion, humility, love and serenity that flows from it, after being developed through these graces, got the passport to spiritual life as desired. I am in gratitude, but now I will not write more now, because once again I was touched by this means giving this sacred task finalized. Thank you all for listening to this humble light spirit. Reunion of Light.